Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new video on our series talking about the Bible. And today we're going to be continuing talking about the kings of Israel and what happened. And let's just go ahead and get started. So in the last video we talked about King Manasseh and how he turned away from false gods to the Lord after he had been captured by Assyria. And now we're going to be talking about his son Amon and his grandson Hosea. So let's start with Amon. So Amon takes over Israel after Manasseh passes away, but kind of like how Manasseh is coming in, he's not very intuitive. He doesn't follow the Lord. He turns back to all the false gods that Manasseh had set up originally and gotten rid of. So Israel's a mess again. So Amon's reign was only about 2 years because obviously God's not happy with this guy. But his reign's only about 2 years because there's like a coup. He gets assassinated, and all the people that assassinated him, all the people that conspired to assassinate him were executed. But basically Amon was no longer the king. Amon's son Hosea becomes king of Israel, king of Judah, I'm sorry. And basically one of the first things he decided to do was to rebuild the house of the Lord. As you know, the house of the Lord at that time, as you can tell in the videos before, we're talking about like this back and forth between Israel is worshiping God and Israel's worshiping false gods like Balaam and Moloch and all that stuff. So they come back and forth, and each time we talk about how God, when they turn away from God, the blessings from God go away. And so basically Hosea helped. The house of the Lord had set a bunch of false gods inside and just defaced the whole thing. So Hosea decides to help, to rebuild it. And while they're rebuilding it, they find the beginning manuscripts of the Bible. At the time, the Bible wasn't complete. The Bible is something that has been, worked on over the years. And a lot of people are like, the Bible is basically, any time that God did something, it was written down. God had people that I can't find the word, but basically he put it in their ears what to write down. And so it wasn't really men writing down the Bible, it was really God through men writing it and giving it to man. So that way he doesn't have to say everything to everybody all the time. But I'm just saying, so they had the older version of the Bible, and it wasn't exactly finished. It was up to maybe Deuteronomy, or around there. But basically, they read it before Hosea, and he heard the words, and he was like, "Well, wait, this isn't good." Obviously he saw how Israel was turned back to the false god worship during Amon, and so he says, well, we're going to turn back to God. We're going to turn back to what we used to do during Manasseh and David. So basically that's what he does. He gets rid of all the false god worship. They restore the house of the Lord. He puts some money out to rebuild the house of the Lord, and everything's back. Hosea restores the priesthood, as kind of like how there's a church, there's kind of like a priesthood in Israel, and that's something that has been, I'm going to talk about another thing. It's called corruption. The priesthood in Israel, it's like a back and forth thing. Whenever the king of Israel was turning away from God, the priesthood, not always, but I'm just saying the priesthood, there were times when, if I'm correct, Jeroboam, he just wiped out the priesthood and just put whoever he wanted as priest, and it wasn't really the same thing. It was just do whatever you want kind of stuff. So I'm just saying there is a corruption. You know, you got to be careful when you talk about a church and you're picking leadership. You have to be careful not to pick people that are just using faith in God for their own self gain. You get what I'm saying? And they just turn people astray and say whatever. But basically, he restored the priesthood, and people are faithful. Faithful leaders means faithful people. Okay, if you have leaders that aren't faithful, they're going to lead the people to the wrong way. So that's another thing. But he restored the priesthood and restored the Passover. And if you don't know, the Passover is like a holiday that Israel has. You learn about it in the Bible, but he basically restored the Passover and the burnt offerings and everything to God. And so the people in Israel, they turned back to God once again. I know, it's like a back and forth thing, you know. That's kind of how society is where one generation, you have to understand these kings reigned for a long time. So when they say, like, when we talk about King David, and we talk about Solomon, and then all the bad kings and the good kings, those are people that reigned for a while. So those are generational changes. So that's kind of something that happens in society where the old generation's one way and then the new generation's another, and then they kind of come back because things aren't going so well. But basically, you know, it's a generational thing, and Hosea is bringing everything back. Now Hosea is faithful, and he turns Israel back to God. But the only problem is he got, what's the word, cocky. Cocky basically means you're getting a little over your head. And I'm not saying he got cocky, but I'm just saying what I'm about to tell you is pretty much there. So basically overconfident. I'm not saying that's how he was, but I'm just saying what I'm about to tell you, what he did that basically ended his kingdom is basically. So, in the Middle East at the time, there were like three big powers. You had Judah and you had Babylon, Assyria, Judah and Israel, and Egypt. Right? These were the big players in the Middle East back in the day. So basically, you know how we always talk about in the end of these videos. I talk about how atheist states are power hungry and they want to invade other countries and they just want to control everything. Now I'm not saying Babylon was atheist, but I'm just saying they were not Jewish, they were not Christian, they didn't believe in God. They worshipped false gods and all that. So really power was the main thing for Babylon. And so another country, Carchemish, they decided, okay, we're going to invade this country. And Egypt decides, no, you know, we're going in. So it becomes a battle between Babylon and Egypt, and, you know, you can imagine what happens. They start fighting. But when Hosea hears about it, you know, he's communicating, well, I might want to get into this war. I might be interested, you know. And here's where the mistake comes in, because Pharaoh Necho of Egypt, you know, he tells Hosea, you know, because there was actually foreign policy back then. It's a lot like how it is now, really. But they send the messengers, and he tells them, well, you know, don't interfere with this war. Don't get involved with this war. And he basically didn't say this by his own mouth, but, you know, God put it in his mouth, you know, don't interfere with the will of God. Don't interfere. And basically he was trying to tell him, don't get in this war because you're not going to win. And so Hosea doesn't listen, and this is where, I mean, he gets overconfident. He doesn't listen. He comes in disguised, his forces disguised, and they get into the war. And first thing that happens, he gets killed. I mean, some archers go and shoot some arrows at him, his forces, and they retreat. They come back to Israel, and he dies he dies in Israel. So that's basically what happened to Hosea. He was doing really good, and then he overconfident, and he got messed up. But that's another thing we want to talk about, listening. You know, I mean, I'm not perfect. I don't, you know, sometimes I'm pretty disobedient to parents and you know, things that I shouldn't do. But basically, at best, you want to, at least at best, And you should always follow directions. You should always do the right thing. But sometimes we don't. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we don't. And I'm not making excuses for that. But I'm just saying, at best, we want to do the best we can at all times to not do the wrong thing. You want to do at best at all times to listen to your parents, to follow the Ten Commandments. And I mean, you're not always going to, like me, things like adultery, like, you know, pornography and stuff like that. You know, sometimes every here and there, you know, I'm going to screw up somewhere. But I'm just saying, try your best to keep away from doing the wrong things, because, you know, that can ruin you. Just one wrong thing can ruin you, and that goes for a lot of things. For example, drugs. You know, you don't do drugs, and then you're like, I might try it a little bit, and it's fentanyl, and then you die from fentanyl. You know what I'm saying? You could have lived like tons of years, but you know, just one mess up can ruin everything. And, you know, that's another thing. But just trying at all times to do the right thing, and, you know, do what Josiah did. He turned Israel back. But try your best to not be led astray and overconfident, because that's what happened to Josiah and his kingdom. His kingdom ended. And that's what happened to Solomon, and that's what happened to other good kings. And you want to be careful not to turn away. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, because I do wrong things sometimes. I'm not perfect all the time. You know, most of the time I do the best I can, but sometimes there's times when you mess up. So I'm just saying, you know, that one mistake can mess everything up. Anyway, there's something called forgiveness, of course, and we're going to talk about that in the future. But basically, Josiah, he dies. Carchemish gets taken over by Babylon and Egypt. It doesn't end well for them. They become like a second world power. Their military might is not the same, and they're at risk for invasion and all that stuff. And Babylon becomes the main power, and Israel, they mourn over their lost king. And, you know, they have a new king that's put in, but I'm just saying, we'll talk about that in the next video. But basically, as best as you can, try and do the right thing, try and listen to your parents, try and not sin as best as you can, try and not be overconfident and make rash decisions. You always want to weigh, especially with military, you always want to weigh your ups and downs. You always want to weigh, can you win, can you make it out? And God was trying to warn Josiah, you know, don't come into this war. And he went in, and that's what happened. It didn't end well. But anyway, thank you for watching this video. I'm just summarizing. I'm not very good at speaking. I stutter a little bit. But if you really want, to understand, you know, the Bible and everything, you have to read it. You can't just watch videos. You know, I make these videos just to summarize and encourage you to read, but you have to actually do it. So, you know, I don't read all the time. Sometimes I read. Most days I read, but I'm just saying, it's best maybe you read at least 3 times a week. Just 3 times a week, maybe like 5 or 10 pages 3 times a week, and you'll begin to understand the Bible. Because something that's happening in society is faith is on decline. People don't go to church. People don't worship God anymore. People don't read the Bible, and that's what the problem is. Because you see how everything in society, you know, crime's going up. You know, obviously this pornography stuff is not helping with morality. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like you know, some awesome dude, because I'm not. But, you know, I'm not a Mr. Clean magical eraser. But I'm just saying, I've seen how these things in society are affecting people and affecting children, and they're turning them away from God. And I'm just saying, you know, you got to do the best you can to do the right thing, but you also need to read. You also need to believe, because everybody, I'm not saying everybody, but there's an incline in society to not have faith anymore. There's an incline in society to be atheist, and it's not helping the country, it's not helping the world, and it's getting us to a point where it's not going to be good. And it's not just about the world and life, it's about the afterlife and everything. You know, if you believe in God and Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit, you will be given eternal life in heaven. You'll be forgiven of all your sins. And I'm just saying, that's the crazy thing. You know, when mankind started out, everybody knew about it. Everybody knew that. Everybody knew that about God. And then, you know, mankind corrupts itself, and you know, a lot of people believe in God and a lot of people don't. And I'm just saying, if we continue this decline, especially in the United States, it's not going to be good, because you see how Israel, they go and they worship God and then they turn away, and then God takes away all the blessings. That's how I say. If you turn away from God, the blessings are turned away from you. You get what I'm saying? So when a country is turned away from God, the blessings, the riches, the safety, the peace, that all gets taken away really quickly. And I'm just saying, you know, we need to next 20 years and beyond, we need to change the trajectory of the country. We need to change to a faithful country, because, you know, people, I don't know what happened. And people don't go to churches as much, people don't read the Bible as much. And I mean, I'm not saying like you have to read every day and you have to go on every Sunday. I'm just saying, you know, at least believe in God. And a lot of people don't anymore. I'm just saying, I'm not judging anybody. But anyway, thank you for watching this video. I hope you read, I hope you believe. It's very important that we do this, everyone together. It's very important. And I know I'm just summarizing. You have to actually read to understand. And that's what I'm just saying. Just read. Just read. Just read. Okay? That's all I can say. Just read. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. God bless you, and goodbye.